This is a special report from CBS News. I'm Hannah Storm in New York. We have breaking news out of London. There are reports of several incidents at 3 train stations, this following the terrorist attacks which occurred 2 weeks ago today. CBS News correspondent Richard Roth is live in London with the latest. Good morning, Richard.
Morning, Hannah. Well, according to what we're told, British Transport Police say that there are reports of incidents at 3 locations on the London Underground. That's the London subway system. At 3 different stations. They say also that those stations have been evacuated, but there are no reports of casualties. No reports of casualties, according to the London Underground. This began as a series of eyewitness reports of smelling smoke. In one case, there was a report unconfirmed of an explosion in a backpack or rucksack that someone was carrying, but again, with no apparent injuries. And as these reports began circulating, police said that they had closed the 3 stations, one in north central London, not far from where a memorial service was underway today, marking the second week's anniversary of the bombings, another in western London, and a third in South London, south of the Thames River. There are no further details other than the word from London Transport Police that there have been no casualties and that the incidents are described as ongoing and under investigation. Hannah?
Do you have any word or not? Was there panic at the scene, Richard? How were the passengers reacting?
One eyewitness at one station, which was the Warren Street station, which is in central London, not far from where the service was going on for the victims of the bombings 2 weeks ago, was asked that question, and he said, well, yes, there was panic. People were running. He said that all he knew of was he referred to the smell of smoke. He said, I got a whiff of smoke. I didn't know what it was or what it was from, and people were evacuated from that subway station.
CBS's Richard Roth, live from London. Thank you. And for the latest on this story, stay tuned to this CBS station. We will have a complete report on tonight's CBS Evening News. This has been a special report from CBS News. I'm Hannah Storm. We have this breaking news this morning, reports of several incidents at 3 different train stations in London 2 weeks after the suicide bombings which killed more than 50 people. Richard Roth joins us now from London with reports. We had reports a moment ago of possible smoke coming out from some of the eyewitnesses. Richard Roth told us that there was some panic that some eyewitnesses did report at the scene. We're talking about 3 different subway stations, 3 locations on the Underground, Oval, Warren Street, and Shepherd's Bush. And for the latest now on this story, we go to Richard Roth in London. Richard, what can you tell us?
Well, the only other thing that's been added is that there is one report from the Warren Street Underground station that you mentioned of a series of small, I don't want to call them explosions, let's call them reports. The initial report was that they sounded like gunshots. Now it's being said, unconfirmed, that they may have been detonators, indicating that these were detonators that were intended to explode a bomb. And these reports come from a company that is apparently working with London Underground. We're not sure if it's a security company or a commercial venture. I just don't know the precise source of it. This coincides, however, with one eyewitness account of an exploding rucksack or an exploding backpack at that underground station. Putting both of those reports together, what you come up with is the suggestion that there might have been a series of small explosions that could have been intended to detonate a bomb but did not. All we've heard so far is that from another eyewitness at that same subway station that there was the smell of smoke and that passengers were evacuated. They've also been evacuated from 2 other underground stations, one to the west and one to the south. And there is a report also of an incident of some sort that's so far undescribed on a London bus. All of this, of course, has eerie and frightening parallels to the events of 2 weeks ago. But the latest we have had from London authorities is that there is no report yet of casualties in any of today's incidents. Hannah?
Okay, so just to recap, though, we do hear of noise, we do hear of smoke, no injuries so far. And what else can you tell us about this bus? Because, as you mentioned, an eerie parallel, 3 weeks ago, 3 trains and a bus. There were suicide bombers on all of those.
There is a report of an incident on a bus, and we don't have more on it yet.
All right, that's Richard Roth live from London. We are going to join Elizabeth Palmer now. She joined us from the telephone. She is there at Warren Street, one of the underground stations that reportedly they have heard smoke and some possible explosion at that station, which has been shut down. Elizabeth, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm standing near the tube station, but already the police have cordoned off the streets around, and all public transport has halted. All the buses are parked. Traffic is diverted. I can hear sirens now as if emergency vehicles are approaching. I did see one ambulance earlier, but the police are certainly behaving very calmly. I spoke to one witness, a man who had been on the train which was in the station at the time, and he said they smelled burning but didn't hear anything. And then the evacuation began, but people were very, very frightened. In fact, he was holding a pair of shoes that a woman had run out of as she left the train. Authorities took control and made sure that nobody was hurt as people rushed out. But he said that the station was evacuated very fast, and now we're just waiting for details from the authorities.
We are seeing preliminary reports, and again, all of this is very hard to confirm, Liz, that there is possibly an injury. Have you been able to determine whether or not anyone has been injured in any of these incidents?
Well, I can see right now there's an ambulance approaching. The police are making way for it. Yes, one police car with a flashing light and an ambulance following. That's what I can see now. Just watching to see exactly what kind of ambulance it is, and I can't quite get a look at it. But the police are certainly behaving in a very calm fashion. I can't see to the underground station itself. But I'm sure that in the next few minutes, some details will emerge.
And one would think it might be routine for an ambulance to approach such a situation, so we don't want to assume that there's an injury just because there's an ambulance on the scene. Liz, as far as you can tell, are people still evacuating the station, or are there still passengers coming out?
There are several exits from this subway station, and I'm at one of them. The witness I spoke to said that everybody left. They had them out in a heartbeat, and they seem to have dissipated. There doesn't seem to be a knot of bystanders. He's still standing on the pavement holding the shoes, but I don't see any others, at least in this particular subway exit.
Liz, can you tell me a little bit more about what this eyewitness told you? You said that he smelled burning. Could you just go into a little bit more detail on what he heard and saw?
He was on the train, and he said that it was a strong smell of burning. He said either tires or electrical wires. And although they didn't hear any noise, as if an explosion had gone off, they were immediately asked to evacuate, and that's when people just began to run, because obviously the terrible memories of the bombings on the 7th are still very, very fresh in everybody's minds. And I know as I ride the subway every day that people are jittery, are nervous. If anybody gets on with a bag or a package, everybody eyes it nervously. And certainly Pakistani and Asian friends of mine in here say that when they get on the subway, people move away from them at times. And so you can see that the whole mood, even though Londoners are stoic and use the subway system every day, hundreds of thousands of them, they are very nervous still and would panic unless, as I said, in this instance, the authorities did tell everybody to exit calmly and managed to keep a lid on it so there were no injuries in the rush for the exit.
Liz, we did hear reports of some people possibly seeing smoke. Did the eyewitness that you spoke to mention smoke at all?
He did not, and he didn't see any, but I know that from another source there is a witness who did smell smoke. Now, you may be able to hear those sirens behind me. I can't see over the heads of the crowd. Obviously, there are lots of people trying to get elsewhere at the moment, and there's a huge commuter jam, so it's hard to see what's happening. But that was another police car that approached at very high speed with all its lights going, not another ambulance. There is an ambulance here, but it's parked as if in waiting just beyond the police cordon. So if there's an urgent need for it, they haven't called it inside right to the subway station.
All right, Elizabeth Palmer. as such, these incidents at the subway stations and a possible bus in London.
Right, incidents is what they're being called, and London Transport now is describing their alert as being what they call Code Amber, which means that cautiously, gently, with determination but not with panic, the system is being brought to a halt. But what this means is trains are not being stopped in their tracks. They're going into stations. Passengers are disembarking at those stations, and they're being brought up above ground from the underground system. So they've not shut it down completely. They're in the process of shutting it down. All of the authorities are still, none of the authorities, I should say, are yet reporting any casualties from any of these three incidents. In one that we have described with lesser detail, and that is the bus incident in East London, there is a report that comes from the company that operates the bus line of an explosion that damaged or blew out windows, but that did not cause any casualties. There was an ambulance that was responding to that scene. There was a report that we haven't seen confirmation of yet that came from one eyewitness on the underground system at the Warren Street station. That was the first one we mentioned to you earlier, which is in north central London. That a passenger had attempted to get on carrying a rucksack or a knapsack, had dropped the bag. Other passengers started to go after this person when there was a sound of explosions that were described as sounding like champagne corks popping. Now, that's one description of it. The other description had been gunshots. The other description had been the sound of a detonator. I kind of like this analogy of the sound of champagne corks popping. There was some kind of a noise that could have been attributed to detonators. Nothing did explode, and apparently there were no casualties there either. The incidents have all been described by London authorities as ongoing, but they haven't claimed that there have been yet any casualties. Hannah?
Have they been able to determine that without a doubt that there are no casualties emanating from these incidents? Is it your understanding, and I know this might be tough for you to ascertain, whether or not everyone has been evacuated from those subways, this Shepherd's Bush, Warren Street, the Oval,
well,
we're looking at Hackney Road where the bus was as well?
I think caution probably makes it wise to consider definite a word that we simply have to avoid right now. We don't know. What we're being told is, and there is a good system of communication here, one of the extraordinarily highly praised aspects of the rescue operation 2 weeks ago was the professionalism and efficiency of the rescuers. We're being told by those people, by those authorities, that they have no reports yet of casualties. And
yet, Richard, can you...
And to characterize it, what I should say is that the police are saying it's not as serious as July 7th.
Right. British police are saying they're not treating these London Underground evacuations as a, quote, major incident.
Right.
And yet, despite the fact that we don't have reports of casualties and injuries thus far, and the tragic events of 2 weeks ago, over 50 people killed and many, many more injured, can you speak a bit, Richard, as to the emotional impact of what's happening today for the people of London?
Well, I think this is, I'd be stating the obvious to say that this is a terrifically frightening experience. Once again, we don't know all of what's happened. It seems it's remarkably reassuring at the moment to hear that there are no reports of casualties. But my goodness, 3 incidents or 4 incidents on the transport system at 4 points of the compass at midday on a system that people use, they depend upon every day. Stiff upper lip and British resolve notwithstanding, this is the kind of thing that would frighten anyone. And until we have a better understanding of what has happened and why, I think that we have to be cautious in terms of anything we can say about it. But there's no doubt that I came back to London today from a trip out of town, and road traffic is much higher than it normally is at this time of year.
All right, Richard.
There are clearly people who don't want to be on public transport.
Certainly, that's absolutely understandable. Richard, we're going to break from you for just a moment. We do have an eyewitness to the day's events at the Warren Street station on the phone, a gentleman named Jimmy Connors. Can you hear me, Mr. Connors? Mr. Connors, this is Hannah Storm in New York. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Jimmy, can you explain to us what happened when you were riding the tube today?
Well, what today on the train?
Yes.
Well, what happened is me and my girlfriend were going on the train because we stopped getting on tubes because of the last thing what happened on, the last thing in King's Cross.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're scared to get on the tubes, and the day we got on it, and all of a sudden then, this was the thing about a bomb, and everyone started panicking, and the train jammed on. And there was a smell of burning wire and fuses, and people was panicking, and a lady next to us actually passed water and everything next to us. The only thing I could think was just grab me rosy beads. I thought we were all going to die that day anyway. And I looked around and grabbed Trina, and she wasn't there. She had to squeeze amongst the people, which was very, very hard at the time. And people was told not to panic, and everyone was just panicking and all heading for the doors. I tried to get them away from the door and get in through to the next carriage, which was impossible. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. I'm listening to you, Mr. Connors. So can you just go back to the moment you actually smelled something?
Back to the first again.
Yeah, you actually smelled something? And tell us about that. And also, Mr. Connors, did you see anything? Did you see any smoke?
Well, listen,
did you hear anything?
See anything because everyone was jumping up so fast, but like it was definitely a smell of death that day, and everyone on that train definitely thought they were going to die that day. And there's definitely something. It was just the Warren Street station. You've heard of Warren Street, haven't you? And everyone was just panicking, and all thought they were going to die, and people leaving things behind them, and all heading for the same direction. And God must have been with every one of us that day, because I really thought every one of us was going to die, everyone on that train. And then the driver, when he stopped the train, he got off the train and he escorted loads of people up to the escalators. And people was in so much shock they just never knew what to do. Hello, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Mr. Connors, we're glad that you're okay. Thank you very much for that account. That's Jimmy Connors, who was a passenger on the Warren Street subway, one of three tube stations where there are reported incidents this morning in London, as well as reports of the windows being blown out on a bus. We're joined now by terrorism expert Neil Livingstone. Neil, this is Hannah Storm in New York. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Hannah.
Neil, what might this indicate, the events of this morning? They are continuing to unfold, but from what you've heard so far?
Well, this would be the first time that we've seen follow-up attacks following any major attack any place in the world. There were no follow-up attacks after 9/11. There were no follow-up attacks after the Madrid attacks, and this would show a much greater level of sophistication that they've been able to take advantage of the terror and the panic that they caused 10 days ago by now revisiting that with, even though there are no reports of casualties at this time, nevertheless, London is on edge, and they have terrified the city and brought it to a standstill once again.
Neil, it's interesting that this incident is being characterized very quickly, according to the Associated Press, by British police. They say they are not treating these London Underground evacuations as a major incident, and that might indicate, as you said, that today's events are not quite as serious. We have no reports of injuries or fatalities thus far as what happened 2 weeks ago. Nonetheless, it sends a powerful message, right?
This sends a very powerful message, and what they're saying is that no matter how great your network of informants and cameras and so on, you still can't stop us. You can arrest us. We can have people that are killed in these attacks, but we have and we're going to be there for a long time.
Neil, is this likely the same group, somehow loosely related to the events of 2 weeks ago, and we're still learning so much in regards to that investigation, or could this be what might be termed some sort of copycat incidents?
Well, there's always a possibility that it's a copycat incident. We've had that before, but again, because we've got multiple attacks in this case, usually a copycat would have just one incident in the, following this. And in this case, we've got multiple incidents, and I would have to believe that this is another probably related al-Qaeda or similar cell.
And what does it tell you that not only are there incidents reported in 3 subway stations, but also possibly a bus, which is exactly what happened 2 weeks ago?
Well, it's a complete mirror of the previous attack, and while they're saying that one of the bombs may have been a nail bomb and so on, it would seem that either that they don't have a lot of explosive this time, or they didn't have the bomb-making capabilities that they had last time. I don't think that you necessarily are going to carry out such attacks and not try to kill or injure people. And so it would appear that the British are very lucky today, for whatever reason at this point, that the bombs are certainly much less powerful than they were 10 days ago. Can
you give us a sense of how they might be responding to these events, and what sort of security measures that the British have been able to take in this short 2 weeks' time since those attacks of 2 weeks ago?
Well, remember, Hannah, there's really not much you can do to protect mass transit and light rail systems. There are just too many people that get on, too many stops, too many people getting off, and so on. And while they were able to quickly dissect the previous attacks and find out those culpable, at least the suicide bombers, their identities, and so on, and that was done with the fact that they have 44,000 cameras in public places in Great Britain. But these are very hard attacks to prevent, and really the best tool you have in preventing these kinds of attacks is are the other riders themselves. Do they see something suspicious? Did someone leave a parcel or a backpack underneath the seat and get off the train? Very, very difficult, and so no matter how much you ratchet up security, as long as you let people take briefcases and backpacks and purses and so on the buses and subway trains, you're only going to have a limited ability to prevent something like this from happening.
And indeed, Neil, if it does come out to play that there are no injuries and no fatalities, that means the people on these trains and perhaps on a bus that are at the heart of these incidents today would still be alive. That's right, and they were clearly not suicide bombers, and as we saw in the previous attacks. And, it is hard to get people to willingly give their lives to carry out an attack, particularly after they've been in the West for a while. And it's much easier to, given the mindset of various people and what we know about recruiting terrorists, much easier to do in places like the Middle East or Iraq than it is in a Western society like London. So, yeah, we know that these people are probably out there still, and they may be able to carry out further attacks, say, 10 days from now. But should they be apprehended, obviously these perpetrators would be a source of information. Neil, we're going to get back to you in just a little bit. That's Neil Livingstone. Morning, Joey.
Good morning, Hannah. Yes, the president has been following up on this. He has been briefed by his national security advisor on the subject of what has been going on in London and has received additional information. But so far here at the White House, they are standing by watching very, very closely, of course, what is happening. But they don't seem to have additional information to give us about what is going on out there. There's certainly a sense that that the folks in London have enough to deal with on their hands right now, and they certainly have a great deal of experience in dealing with local situations, local domestic terrorism in London. In fact, there's sort of a sense that in London, they've always had sort of top-flight intelligence, security services as well. The best situation is to stand back, let them do what they need to do in an immediate emergency situation, and then ask questions later, offer help wherever it is needed, of course, but not interfere as things are going on. It is interesting that the president has had London and the events of 2 weeks ago on his mind very closely. Just yesterday, he appeared up at the Port of Baltimore. He was talking about port security and the potential renewal of the Patriot Act, which is under consideration up on Capitol Hill right now. And he's mentioned that as we saw in London, the terrorists are still active. They are still plotting to take innocent life. So my message is clear. This is no time to let our guard down. Clearly, the events of London are on the mind of the president, and here at the White House, they are watching closely. But at this point, not interfering, just keeping an eye on offering whatever assistance they can as warrants develop. Hannah?
Thank you. That's Joey Chana with reaction from the White House this morning. Now let's go back to Elizabeth Palmer at Warren Street Station, where an eyewitness told me just moments ago the smell that he smelled there in the subway was, quote, the smell of death. We do have no reports, however, of, although, however, frightening and life-threatening those incidents might have been, no reports of any fatalities so far, and possibly only one injury. Liz, what can you tell us?
Well, I can see the emergency vehicles are down at the subway entrance, but they're not moving. They have not come out, as reported earlier. The crowd is dissipating somewhat. The witnesses all report exactly the same thing, that they smelt burning, and that is witnesses on, there were two trains in the station at the time, and on both sides of the platform, witnesses could hear burning and then were ushered out of the station. Initially, there was some panic, but then things settled down as the authorities took charge, including the train driver. And now the police are maintaining the cordon, but I don't see any more sirens, police vehicles, or ambulances coming to the station.
So you mentioned that the eyewitnesses that you talked to, and so far this is pretty universal, that they could actually smell burning, but no one actually saw anything that you've been able to determine. Is that right, Elizabeth?
That is correct. Nobody saw or heard anything, at least of those that I've spoken to, although Richard mentioned people saying that they heard something like the popping of champagne corks. But in all the people who came out this subway exit, and I must stress there are several exits, I'm seeing one stream of people. They all just report this burning.
How quickly were emergency personnel and investigators able to arrive at the scene after the incidents were reported?
It seemed the subway authorities were the first to act, and they seem to have taken control very quickly. Police were here within minutes, but the actual cordon and stopping of traffic and so on probably took about 20 minutes to half an hour. I see now that the buses are stopped all along the road. Richard mentioned earlier that the public transit system is slowly being wound down. The buses approaching Warren Street Station were stopped within a quarter to half an hour of the explosions.
Yeah, we're seeing a video of the buses right now, Elizabeth, and they are all stopped along the side of the road. Can you give us some insight into what they might be able to determine as they're investigating the nature of these incidents from video cameras? Will there be extensive video available of those who were entering the stations and might have been on those trains?
There should be. Britain is the most cameraed country in the developed world, and certainly we know from the original bombings on the 7th of July that there were various glimpses of the bombers on the way. If somebody did come into the tube stations or got onto the bus today, there is virtual certainty that they will be visible on one of the many cameras they would have had to have passed. On the buses, there are usually several cameras on one bus. So no matter where anybody might have sat, they would have been captured. And certainly in the tube, they're at regular intervals.
Elizabeth, we're hearing reports from the Associated Press of men dressed in chemical protection suits entering that Warren Street tube station. That's what you've witnessed as well?
Well, I saw that the tube emergency response unit drove in, and it was a great big tube truck. Inside, there may have been men dressed in chemical suits, but I haven't seen them from here.
All right, Elizabeth, we will get back to you in just a second. Once again, that's Elizabeth Palmer reporting live from the Warren Street station, one of 3 tube stations, subway stations there in London with reported incidents. We have heard reports of eyewitnesses, some of them seeing smoke, smelling burning, hearing explosions, something akin to what one witness told our Richard Roth was champagne corks popping.
We have reports of 3 incidents in the London Underground, also known as the Tube, at the Warren Street station, which is very close to the King's Cross station, which is where one of the incidents 2 weeks ago occurred. There was also an incident at the Shepherd's Bush station, which is out in the western part of London, and as well the Oval station, which is at the bottom end of the Northern Line in the southern area of London. We also have reports of some sort of an explosion aboard a double-decker bus, believed to be on the upper level of the bus, according to reports from the bus driver. The windows of the bus, as we understand, at that upper level were blown out. So far, we only have reports of 1 injury, that injury occurring at the Warren Street station. There are no reports of fatalities thus far. However, the Transport for London organization has shut down 3 lines of the London Underground, and that is the Hammersmith line, Hammersmith and City line, the Victoria line, and the Northern line. We also heard reports from Elizabeth Palmer just a short time ago that police have cordoned off the University College Hospital, which is near the Warren Street station, which is where a lot of the casualties from the bombings 2 weeks ago were taken. And we have reports that armed police have entered the hospital, perhaps potentially looking for a suspect, because we have heard some eyewitness reports that people were seen running away from the trains. At the Warren Street station, 1 person was seen running away from a train by eyewitnesses, and at the Oval station, an eyewitness report had it that someone came up to the train, threw a knapsack inside the train, and then ran away. Passengers, according to this eyewitness, tried to stop this individual but couldn't, and that person got away. So possible that police have entered this hospital looking for a potential suspect who may have been injured in what is described so far as a small explosion at the Warren Street station, sounding very much like the sound of champagne corks popping. Now, a lot of people have speculated as to what that could mean. Could it be that perhaps it was some sort of prank and these might have been nothing more than firecrackers? Could it have been a detonator that went off but failed to explode? The rest of a bomb? No one is sure at this point. All we do know is that there are reports of 3 incidents in the London Underground. 1 incident reported aboard a bus in the eastern section of London, and reports of 1 injury. The police chief of London now says that there were 4 explosions or attempted explosions. So confirming indeed that at all 4 locations there was some sort of explosive device that was involved. Our Richard Roth in our London bureau has been following developments there throughout the morning. Let's go to Richard now. And Richard, what's the latest that you can give us there from your vantage point?
Well, in addition to what you mentioned, John, the police, Metropolitan Police Commissioner also says that people should go about their normal business. He says, stay where you are, go about your normal business. The Prime Minister is not doing that. He's canceled a meeting that he had today with the Australian Prime Minister and has convened a meeting of the British Security Services response officials who respond to security situations. It's a committee that's called COBRA, which refers, in fact, to Briefing Room A. BRA is the part of the acronym. But the Prime Minister has cleared his schedule in order to do that. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner says this clearly is a serious incident, but authorities have not drawn any comparisons yet with what happened 2 weeks ago, and by all accounts, if there are casualties, if there are injuries, I should say, there may have been 1. We have not heard any reports of serious injuries or of extensive casualties. Authorities have been saying from the start that casualties, if they exist, they seem to be light, and this is not something that's on a par with what happened 2 weeks ago. But the details of what's exactly happened are still quite unclear. 4 explosions or attempted explosions, according to the police. There are armed police that have responded now to a hospital where it's possible that one of those who attempted to set off an explosion has gone. There are 3 tube lines, subway lines that are shut down. Passengers have been evacuated, and in some areas, apparently out of concern about the potential presence of explosives, people have been asked not to use their cellular phones. John?
Now, Richard, this, of course, was the worst nightmare that Londoners and British security services were worried about, that there still may be some bombers out there, despite the fact that it's believed that the 4 bombers from 2 weeks ago died in the explosions, and they'd made a number of raids in Leeds and some other cities. They made that one arrest in Egypt that turned out to be nothing, and other arrests in Pakistan. It would appear at the very least that these people perhaps may not be connected to the same cell that engaged in the bombings 2 weeks ago, but it would indeed seem to indicate that there is still a very clear and present danger there in London.
Well, authorities have said that from the start. The fact is, we just don't know. We don't know who may have done this, what their motives are, or what possibly their connections might have been to the explosions of 2 weeks ago. And I imagine it's going to be some time before we learn whether or not there is any connection to those.
Now, we have some timings of these explosions as they're being reported to us from police. Only 2 timings that we have at this point. The Warren Street station explosion. The emergency call went out at 12:45. The Oval Underground station in South London, the call went out at 12:38. But as Richard, as we learned a couple of weeks ago, those times can be somewhat off from what the real time of the incident was. And we did learn the day after the London explosions that, in fact, there was not the half-hour delay between the first bomb and the last bomb going off in the underground, but that they were almost simultaneous. Is there any chance that this could turn out to be the same sort of situation? It's just that the time discrepancies we're hearing now are based on when calls were made to emergency services.
Right. The times that we had initially seemed to reflect the times when eyewitnesses reported them or when news agencies got wind of them from eyewitnesses. I don't think we have a good fix yet on what time exactly each of these occurred. Now, what we are told, however, though, is that there is clearly some kind of a there are police operations that are still ongoing. There have been reports that police have been seen pursuing someone down what's called Tottenham Court Road, which is a street onto which the Warren Street subway line exits. That's also in the area of the hospital that armed police were seen to have entered earlier. There are also reports that Whitehall, which is the street that is the kind of the Pennsylvania Avenue, if you will, of London. It's the street on which, off which the Prime Minister lives and where the major government offices are located. That's been cordoned off by police. Whether there is another incident brewing there or if this is just a security precaution, we don't yet know.
John, as you can imagine, the president is very closely staying on watch for any late developments on this. He has been briefed pretty thoroughly about what is known at this point, both by Andy Card and his normal security briefing every day. He received additional information there. They're following up on what is known, but so far that is not a great deal. They say that they are closely monitoring, but there is not any indication of any plans to change anything here at the White House. The regular morning briefing underway in the White House press room. Both the president and the first lady have speeches away from the White House scheduled for today. There's no indication that they are going to make any moves to change any of that. They're continuing with the normal level of security, which of course is quite high here at the White House. And we also know that out on the metro system, the subway system in Washington, which, as you know, is very widely used both by locals and tourists, that system went to orange alert, the second highest state of alert, right after the first round of London bombings 2 weeks ago, and it has stayed at that point. That does mean that there is additional security, additional observation of the subway lines. But as they told us from the Metro Department today, there is no move to do anything differently today than they were doing yesterday. Everyone is closely standing by, watching to see what developments come from London, watching to see if there are any needs from the British authorities that the U.S. authorities can answer. So far, everyone just staying on alert, watching to see what they can and what they will do on that, John.
And we should point out as well, Joey, that not only is the metro in Washington, D.C. on orange alert, but so is the subway in New York City, in Los Angeles, and in Chicago as well. You'll probably remember that President Bush was at the G8 summit conference in Gleneagles, Scotland on July the 7th when these first incidents took place, and he came out very quickly and issued a statement I don't imagine, Joey, though, given what appears to be a lack of severity of these incidents at this point, that the president will have anything to say on this.
No, John, there's been no indication the president intends to come out at this point and say anything at all. His first speech, which was supposed to be about the CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, scheduled for this hour this morning, or just in a short time from now this morning. There's no indication that he's going to add anything to that schedule. We haven't heard anything from the White House, but again, there's such a small amount of information coming in from London at this point. It might be too premature for the president to come out and say anything about it at all.
Right. Even though the speech this morning is about the Central American and Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement, the president often throws in some other themes into these speeches. Terrorism, of course, is one of his favorite themes. I imagine that there's a chance, Joey, this morning that the president might go down that road again and perhaps have some reference to both the July 7th bombings and perhaps this incident this morning.
Right, and he has been talking and thinking a good deal about the London situation. Just yesterday, he went up to the Port of Baltimore. He was talking about the pending renewal of the Patriot Act, and he made reference to the London bombings of 2 weeks ago as a point of, look, this is not the time to let down the guard. So he's clearly been thinking about it, as you can imagine. We're here ready to ask questions about that, but so far we have received no indication that the White House intends to make any special statement about London yet this morning.
All right, Joey Chen at the White House, thanks very much. Let us know if you get anything else from there. We have Liz Palmer on the phone with us now, and Liz is very close to that University College Hospital where police have apparently entered with guns drawn, looking for some person who may or may not be connected to this incident. Liz, what's the latest that you've got for us?
Well, I managed to get right up to University College Hospital, the main building. There are many buildings. And we got right up to the main administrative building, which is directly opposite one of the entrance to the Warren Street subway. And it's a great big green glass building, multi-story. And we couldn't get very close because the police told us that the security risk was very high around there. It's not clear whether she was referring to a possibility of explosives in the subway station. Now, we know that the dog sniffer team has gone into the cordoned-off area, and they specialize in sniffing out explosives, or whether these reports of an armed man having taken refuge in the hospital are true, and they're afraid that gunfire might shatter glass and shower the people around. At the moment, it's quiet. I can't see any armed men, certainly, but they are maintaining a very tight cordon around both that entrance to the subway station and the hospital.
Liz, we have heard that police in chemical protection suits were seen entering the Warren Street station. I imagine that would just be a precaution. Explosives can be dangerous materials in terms of their toxicity. Do you think that that's just a prudent precaution, or may there be something else down there that they're looking for?
It's very hard to tell at this stage. Now, the police, the tube special support unit came in a truck, and they must have a whole protocol to deal with these things, and as a precaution may have anti-chemical or biological suits that they wear just in case. Nothing we've heard so far suggests that there was a big explosion in the tube, but that's not to say there isn't undetonated explosives down there, especially if the popping sound some people heard was detonators. So at this stage, the police must be proceeding with extreme caution, so it could be that those suits are just a preventive and cautionary measure.
Now, of course, we know, Liz, that 2 weeks ago on July 7th, when the major incidents happened in the London Underground and aboard that bus, it was quite crowded. It was right at the tail end of rush hour. These incidents were about 12:30 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon over the lunch hour. How crowded would the Underground be at that period of time?
It would be moderately crowded. The cars wouldn't have been stuffed. But this is the height of tourist season. Many people are using the subway, particularly in this area, to get from one tourist attraction to another. And then there are lots of students here on summer courses, as well as Londoners. The subway is never not busy, if you like. I'm walking through the streets around Warren Street now, and they're just a sea of people dragging suitcases with briefcases, cell phones, trying to get where they were going, that because the subway is closed here, everybody's been put into the street, and it's orderly mayhem, if you like. Now, I see that the buses have begun to move again on some of the main roads. They had been ordered to park and not go anywhere for about an hour and a half, but they seem to be moving again, which indicates that at least some parts of the public transit system are getting back to normal.
Right, just checking the Transport for London website here, and the tube service, excuse me, at the Hammersmith and City Victoria Northern lines is still suspended. So while the buses may be moving, the tube trains that were associated with those incidents still are not yet moving. With so many people around you, Liz, as you said, dragging around suitcases and briefcases and whatnot, have you had a chance to talk to anybody who was either in the station or on the train?
Yes, I've talked to 3 people who were on the train, and they all report the same thing. They all report that they smelled burning, but didn't hear anything, and ran out. In fact, one man said people ran out so fast that one woman left her shoes behind, and he picked up her shoes to try and bring them to her on the street. People were very panicked. At the moment, we know that the police have taken, as I mentioned, the sniffer dogs in. They've taken in a fire brigade unit and a couple of ambulances, but I haven't seen anyone come out. So at the moment, at least from my vantage point, no proof that there are casualties being taken out of the station or, in fact, the tunnel.
This all seems a little bit odd, Elizabeth, that 2 weeks ago we had 4 successful detonations of fairly powerful, compact yet very powerful explosives that killed so many people. And this morning we appear to have 4 explosions of very small devices, or maybe devices that failed to go off. One would think that if it was the same group, if they were, or an associated group, if they were successful the first time, they would be successful the second time. Anybody that you've talked to there have any kind of thoughts on what exactly might be going on?
Nobody is willing to speculate, certainly not the police. And the Londoners who were evacuated from the tube are first grateful that the authorities reacted so fast, and secondly are just plain angry. But, there's a lot of guesswork going on, nobody willing to go out on a limb and say that these were perhaps copycat attacks or perhaps failed follow-up attacks. Now, I've just got right to the front of this university hospital main administration building that I mentioned, and I've spoken to one witness who said he saw 3 armed police officers run into the hospital. As I said, it's directly opposite the tube station entrance, and nobody's seen them come out again, so presumably they're in there. I see that there are people inside the building looking out at us, so it doesn't look as if panic reigns inside that hospital, and certainly we're close enough to be showered by glass if something did happen, so I have to assume that the police don't think that the danger is very high indeed.
Here's something you can put in your notebook as well, Liz. Our affiliates in Britain, Sky News, is reporting that police say no chemical agents were involved in the London transit incident. So if, in fact, they were wearing those protective suits to protect themselves against potential chemical agents, and perhaps they were thinking that the small size of these bombs, they weren't meant to cause a lot of destruction from the explosion, but perhaps they may have been designed to ignite some other agent. They appear to have ruled that out at this point.